It's July, so we typically do something a little bit different in July anyway. It's a little toned down because school's been out, folks have been on break, so our teachers have been on break, staff have been on break for a good portion of the time. Some people have been working away, so I'll talk about what that looks like in a moment, but it's a little different. And so tonight I thought just with it being what it is, I go with a single deck of slides. You all have that, and we'll roll from that tonight, which might be simpler and maybe something we move forward with future meetings, just so we're not toggling between different documents every couple of minutes and unsharing and sharing screens. In any case, got two areas of school I want to focus on today during our mission moment. And one is that just this past month, we had two really tremendous graduation ceremonies, one at the middle school and one at the high school. Team, get this. This is our 7th, 8th grade graduation that we've celebrated at our school. With our high school, it is our 4th. And so I just say being at both events, our middle school event was held in the auditorium indoors because of the weather. First time we've done that. High school was at a venue in Manhattan, a big, nice venue that accommodated everyone, but just well done. Teams did a great job of just conducting and orchestrating quaint, interactive, personable, polished, and all around positive events at both sides. Families left really thrilled and proud of their kids. Kids left proud. So just nice events to be a part of. This is our valedictorian at our 8th grade who gave a really tremendous speech. In addition, they're the kids at the end. They throw their caps in the air, always a bit hesitantly in middle school, and they get a bit more confident in high school as they do it a second time around. At the high school ceremony, got some lovely kiddos, some graduates of ours, along with some staff. And looking at these graduates here, I believe a couple are going to Temple next year. One might be going to LaGuardia, I believe, I believe here in the city. And then I'm not sure about the third. I'll have to come back to you. You'll see on the right, Stephanie Zinnerman spoke as our keynote. She's been a sort of advocate for the school over the past year and has become a friend of the school. So I'm excited to partner with her moving forward, but really nice to have her at the event. And she gave a really thoughtful speech and kids, I think, took in her remarks pretty profoundly. So good event overall, good 2 events overall. And we are proud of our kids. I think right now we're just under 300 graduates from our high school over the past 4 years who are now shaking and moving in the world. So that is mission moment 1 of 2 tonight. The other bonus is just that we did, for the first time ever, sponsor and provide opportunity for kids at our high school to attend and take part and immerse themselves in international travel. And so small group of kids went to Costa Rica with some faculty back in June. We did so in partnership with a group called I Am Cultured. And so they set this up, make the experience really rad for our kids and staff. And so in getting the rundown afterward, full days for these kids, getting up at 6:30, immersing themselves in the culture of Costa Rica. They got to make coffee. They took cooking classes, dance classes. They attended an after-school program and met other kids. Walk town, and so this is, I believe, them on an adventure, doing a sort of rope team endeavor. And then here's them at an exhibit, I imagine, and taking it in and playing a part. So just some good things there. We'll continue with this. Would love to branch it out to the middle school at some point in time. But I think, this is not something a lot of kids get to experience in middle school, high school. I certainly did not. And so I'm just proud that they're experiencing this, and they'll carry it forward forever as they take in and make moves and impact the world. So a couple of mission moments for today. In terms of headlines, and I'm just going to continue to roll through in order of our agenda. And so I just want to give you a sense of what we've been up to over the past month even with our teachers taking a breather and much of our admin doing the same. So programming continues. So I think we've got Summer Academy at both sites right now. We've got about 55 kids in grades 6, 8 and 55 kids in 9, 12 taking part in Summer Academies, getting some extra help. It's small group in structure, very intimate. In the middle school, we're doing this through a Boost grant that we received last year as well. And so that's helpful in making this especially I would say generous in terms of time and attention for kids. And so our staff, teachers have opted in to facilitate and work with kids in small groups during summer academies. So that's happening. In addition to that, we have some summer enrichment going on, a little smaller than what we did last year, but I think still really thoughtful and engaging for kids. So we've got some athletic camps. We've got grappling going on. You see the picture on the right. If you've taken part in grappling, you know it's not for everyone, but it's a lot of fun. Basketball, track, and dance, which just resemble and reflect our kids' interests over the summer. There are about 80 kids taking part in camp. Some of this is around getting kids who are coming into our school new in our 6th grade, immersed in our school, excited about things. So it is a bit of a recruitment initiative in itself, and we've got 20 or so 6th graders coming in this year who are taking part in this camp. The enrichment is run by staff, and there's been a lot of really strong positive communication with families who are excited by this being an opportunity for their kids over the course of the summer. So that is live and going on, right, Simon?
Hi.
Hey, man. So in addition to that, there is some PD going on, some training, some summer stuff going on for staff and faculty as we look to upgrade our skills. Couple of examples here. Our instructional coaches this coming week are taking part in what's called a Teach Like a Champion camp, where they learn how to develop teachers on certain essential teaching techniques and skills. So that's happening. We also have or had our APs of school culture and some of our deans of students and a few others take part in the training at the Charter School Center, where they learned how to facilitate student discipline hearings, which need to be well done. And if they're well done, they tend to carry over and have impact on kids' lives and families' lives moving forward. So not something we always want to dig into, but when they happen, we want to do them well. So I was happy to have people experience some structure. We haven't done this before formally, so nice to have. And then, as you know, PBIS is sort of like our framework for how we engage kids in our school systematically and making really good decisions behaviorally and otherwise, and being good community members. And so as a part of that work and retooling this year, we do have an internal group of leaders immersing themselves in some texts, talking about practice, and then spreading that with others as we think about preparing for the coming year. So those are a couple of quick hits with the headlines about what's going on this summer. And Lenny, good evening to you. How are you?
I'm doing well. Can you hear me?
Can hear you just fine. Happy July to you and welcome.
Same to you, my friend.
All right, we're just moving through. We did a quick mission moment on graduation and an international trip our kids took, and now we're talking about some of the things that are happening now in real time as current headlines. So welcome, and feel free to shout out as you always do with any questions, ideas, considerations, etc.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Apologies for being late.
So we move into another kind of just like update, and this could have been its own item, but I think just in terms of 8th grade retention, as you know, we want to up that based on where we've been the past few years, and we've done some things strategically to make that happen. And so quick update, it seems as if we've got about 50% of our 8th graders who graduated just a month ago coming to our high school in the coming year. We had a target of 60% this year, which in my mind is still not the ultimate goal. Is still lower than what I'd like to see, but it was meant to represent incremental progress. This is representing incremental progress. If you recall, we were at just about a third of our kids last year continuing to our high school. So we've made a big jump from last year to this year with still room to grow. And so I think some of the things we did to make that happen this year are that we opened up some really intimate, smart, strategic, customized cross-site visitations among small groups of our 8th grade coming to our high school in the spring and chatting with those who share similar interests, experiences, et cetera. And that seemed to do really well. More generally, we did a lot more cross-site interaction related stuff, whether it was with enrichment, with dance and theater, or with our athletic program and other areas. So I think that helped. And then I think there was some really consistent communication this spring with some of the families who were on the fence and thinking about Unity perhaps versus another school, and us actively engaging them in conversations that they're making an informed decision. So we'll continue with a lot of those same strategies this coming year and do so sooner than we did this year, so that we've got perhaps 70% of our kids from our middle school continuing on to our high school next year. So some gains and more room to grow. Are there any questions here? This was something that we dove into a couple of months ago that I thought was important that I wanted to circle back to.
Yeah, do you do exit interviews or anything like that to figure out what's going on there?
Informally, we don't have like a survey that we do for kids in our 8th grade moving on to 9th grade, but we do have a sort of database where we take notes, keep them, share them with regard to kids' interests and the sort of why and why not they may be continuing to our high school. And so that was a part of, I think, some of the research we did this fall in preparing to make a pitch to our kids and ensure that they've got all the information they need to know that Unity High is ready to serve and eager to serve them and their families beyond 8th grade.
Are they going to schools in the area, or are they going? Who are the people we are not retaining, and where are they going?
Yeah,
Are they our top performers? Yeah. Are they, or how are they doing? From an educational standpoint, and are they going to the school next door, or are they traveling a distance because they want to study music or whatever?
It varies. I think we've got to, the next step is sort of looking at the data to see sort of where things landed. My understanding based on the data I saw this spring is that we did a better job of having fewer kids go to schools that may have been appealing to them, but may not be serving them as well than in past years. So what really hurts is when a kid decides to go to some other school and not go to Unity. And just historically, we know that school may not serve that family and that child as well. So we try to minimize that. And I think we did a better job of that this year than in past years. And then we had some kids going to schools that I think are going to serve them as well, or perhaps sometimes even better, depending on their interests and things. And so there was a student you saw earlier, the valedictorian, who was really kind of weighing two options and is going to a pretty good school down the street nearby, and knows the school well, and we're happy for her. And we've had some of our faculty graduate from that school too. So it runs the gamut. But I think there's a deep dive to do this month, moving into September, about the degree to which kids were going to schools that historically may not have the same data as our high school. And then the question is why from there. And then for the kids who are going to comparable schools or schools that perhaps have outperformed our high school, it's good to know that, and the percentage of kids doing that, and then which kids are doing that.
Okay.
So more to say here, but some interim reasons to sort of say, all right, we're moving in the right direction. Okay. So just enrollment wise, the team officially is back on Monday, but we have had senior leaders and others sort of involved in the work this past week. And so we had our first enrollment meeting this month after being off for about 2.5 weeks today. And so these numbers are rough with regard to, there's still there's a lot of movement in the summer as families kind of make decisions and perhaps are in limbo between two schools, et cetera. And so we're sorting out some of that record keeping and data now, but things look pretty good. I think that's the headline. Things seem, I would say, better than where I thought they would be perhaps as of early June, where we had some question marks about 6th grade, especially. But essentially what we have is forecasted 6th grade enrollment right now is about 78, give or take some, where we're now again looking at some of the question marks with regard to students. Our goal is 96. But we feel good about that number 78, which was higher than it was last month by about 10 students. And we do see additional movement forward there. So that's 6th grade. 9th grade, we're still, again, looking at 8th grade enrollment and which of our kids are exactly going to our 9th grade or may not. And so there's a little bit of movement there too. And so we also have some kids outside who have shown interest in Unity High, but haven't submitted all documentation. So we haven't counted them as enrolled yet. And so that number perhaps is the one that as of today, I'm looking at most closely, and the team is looking at most closely to make sure that we're at 80 come September. We do have a big waiting list for 10th grade too. So if we want to dip into that, we can. And so there's some options here as we look at having overall at our high school 285 as of the first day of school. And then at the middle school, something closer to 260 or so. So I think overall we're in pretty good form with some good next steps in just connecting with our families to make sure the kids who are question marks are confirmed, and then continuing to enroll kids who are on wait list and continuing to recruit where opportunities arise. But I think overall I feel pretty good about where things stand today with additional work to do. Just to be clear, we're budgeted right now at 533. And I think in the past, we've been budgeted about the 530 mark and maybe started at about 550, 560 at around this time of year, and then declined to something in the high 540s, low 540s. And so I'm waiting to see if sort of that pattern holds here as well. But we're doing some things I think this year a bit differently that to me have us hopefully holding at about 550, 560. Are there questions there? I just rattled a whole bunch of numbers off with no visuals, so apologies for that. But does anyone have any clarifying questions or perhaps a concern of note, et cetera?
Well, what's the reason for coming a little short in 9, but having a big wait list in 10? How do you explain that?
Yeah, Chris, if you can answer that you're probably best suited to do so.
Some of the middle schools that we typically recruit from actually recently expanded into high schools. So I'm thinking of 2 charter middle schools where in the past, quite a few students from their schools would enroll. That's one piece of it. The other piece is that the 8th grade class up from Unity Middle was especially small this year. So we have less kids coming from our middle school, and then other outside charter middle schools have recently expanded to high schools.
Okay, so even though our percentage is better, our number is lower because the class was smaller.
Right, that class, that cohort of students is just from our middle school is just really small.
About 70 students.
So sorry, I've been here a lot.
We lead busy lives, so folks have just a general sense of an appreciation of what's going on. So board membership wise, you get to meet Juliana last month. She's now working through paperwork, so that's in process. And we connected 2 weeks ago, and so I imagine her taking part in the August meeting informally, without any vote, without any approval from SED. And I would hope that SED, if all goes well, then approves her for a September meeting. So that's the way things seem to be leading right now, but we shall see. But in any case, I'd like to have her at the table, contributing to the governance work here during these meetings as soon as next month, even if she's unable to kind of take part in voting. And then finally, we were awarded a grant. In the spring, we applied for a grant that we received, I think, in our second year, which is put forward by the Walentis Foundation and is just a good amount of resources that goes to area schools. And so we've been applied since, but we did this year, and we did so in collaboration with our partner school, PS 44, at our middle school. Co-wrote the thing, was awarded $25,000, and that is going to upgrading the stage, which hasn't been done in a whole host of years. You saw those photos and the curtains in the background of the middle school photos, and there's definitely some work to do there. So lighting, curtains, some electrical work, acoustics, that kind of thing. And so that'll happen this coming year, but I'm happy, I think, especially to have done this with PS 44 and the leadership there. I think it just shows some good paths forward with collaboration in ways that benefit our kids and the kids that we hope to serve at 44. And so I think with that, I may have skipped one. I did. I skipped over one. So let's jump back one page to hiring and staffing. So you have a sense of where we are. I think generally speaking, we've got some openings and maybe similar to where we were last year, but in a better place than perhaps we've been in years where I've been stressed about some openings that are crucial going into the year. So at the middle school, we've got a learning specialist position open and an operations position open. Got some possibilities for both positions right now. So there is a pipeline. The high school, we have an ELA position in the 10th grade, and then a dance teaching and dean of students position at our high school. With both those second and third positions, we'd hired people and they backed out recently. So that's frustrating when that happens, but it does happen. And so we're doubling back and now looking to find folks worthy of working with our kids in those two important areas of our school. So same practices are happening with regard to the actions we're taking. We're pretty aggressive on recruitment using online platforms. We do some sponsoring and connect with folks that way. That's been our best tool. And then internally, we have had some people recently come through in June that were internally referred, and we'll continue with that. And I've got in my calendar to send out a note to staff who again are off right now, but send something out on Monday saying, hey, look, here are openings. We want top people to do the work with. And so please reach out to your networks, and in doing so, here's a small incentive. So that's where we are. I think those are the major headlines I bring up for this meeting so that y'all again can appreciate what's going on in July at school when a lot of folks are at the beach. I'll pause there. Are there any questions about summer, July, moving into August before we talk about some strategic planning, specifically some updates with the purchase of our high school facility?
Just keep in mind what's the executive session versus,
Yeah, right on. Yep. And so I think with that, there it is. There's our baby, right? And so this is our first home. This is the before photo of the building. And so we're going to take care of it. We're going to make it amazing and make it our home. But that is where we are. And so with that, just some updates, or I want to give you a sense of big picture, and maybe I'm doing this also with a bit of rehearsal in mind. I think I'm trying to sort of tell the story, which I'm going to want to do. We're going to want to do in the next couple of months as we think about, okay, why do we do this? And what does it mean for school in the long run? So here's sort of like what I sort of see now, but please help me smith this so that it becomes something that we can all share out with other stakeholders and perhaps people who are interested in supporting our cause moving forward. So big picture, we began almost 3 years ago, I believe, discussing this possibility of purchasing our high school building. And then I guess within those conversations, our landlord expressed an interest in perhaps wanting to sell the facility to us. And so it was something that this team engaged in pretty rigorously in terms of conversation and whether it made sense. I think the conclusion was that in doing this transaction, it did offer some benefits to school over the long term, and also presented some circumstances for us that would allow for us to bolster our programming at the school, and so it give us some autonomy. And so I think that's just it. And so with this purchase, which was a long-term lease prior to this, at the end of some time, we'll own this building as opposed to handing it back after the lease is over. And I think that's good for school in terms of giving it a foundation to work and build and grow from, again, as well as some autonomy. So that's the benefit I see, big picture, stepping back and kind of how we began to engage in this and where we are now. Does that seem to resonate with folks here? Is that the story that is to be told, or do you think there are other elements that are worthy of naming?
Yeah, I think I would highlight the fact that the real estate is difficult, and it's good to have a sense of stability. I think we should hone the message amongst ourselves and sort of come up with something for the following. We decide to go out and sort of see what resonates the most with potential donors.
Marion, the audio is a little fuzzy. I don't know if it's just me.
Okay.
No, I can't really understand you either, Marion.
Okay.
You should have spoke up earlier. You went on for a little.
Yeah, speaker. My speaker had gone to sleep. Is this better? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, my speaker didn't want to hear me anymore. I think we all should put our minds together to come up with a punchy message for potential donors. I think the idea of sort of having a home base and having stability and having certainty in a sometimes difficult real estate market, I think is useful. I think so yeah, there's some of these other elements that I think we're going to need to be more cautious and scripted around because they could be read the wrong way. But yeah, so I agree we need to have a message and sort of we probably need to fine tune it somewhat.
Other thoughts?
Yeah,
From
that's right. I mean, look, as part of the bond offering, we borrowed money to do renovations and, stuff like that. And the existing facility, we also contemplated an expansion option. And with the sale of the property next door pending, who knows? But it's on the market. We're going to lose the trailers, and so we need to focus on expanding the current space, and that's going to be a part of the story. Is we got control of this so that we could control the expansion of the building, and we've done a lot of work on that with the basement versus cellar issue and all that nonsense. But yeah, we need to script this out and approach people in the right way. We need Josh. Has anything more happened on the basement cellar thing, or is there any work to be done there? Okay, so we're in a pause
Nothing over
there.
the past month. Nope.
Yeah. So the funding's going to come in. The bonds can be issued. Well, this week, funding will come in. So we do need to really focus on deploying that money appropriately on the the renovations that we outlined in the offering. And really kind of get that done. So I think we need to maybe Josh, it's just you, me, and get the architects on and talk about what we should do immediately and how to get the proper filings done and all that with respect to the the basketball court and the ceiling. Get all that taken care of.
And I think we will. Yes, I think maybe that makes sense. I'll say a bit more about what I think the next steps are in a moment, and we can kind of like just sort of make sure that seems accurate. I think in terms of this group here, I'm gonna open up. I'm gonna try to open up just the timetable so folks can have an appreciation for some of the work that's been going on behind the scenes over the past month, and it hasn't been quiet at all. It's been pretty busy, and so. I want to thank Jim and Mario and her team for being really involved in this throughout. I want to thank Kristen, who's been involved over the past month while she's been traveling. But essentially, big ticket items over the past month include kind of us posting and having an investor presentation. First time I've kind of taken part in that. Jim, you may have seen these before when you were there. What was your sense of how that went? In comparison to how you thought it would go?
It appears that people are buying the bonds, so it went well.
Proof in the
What
So you gotta know.
did they price at? I don't even know.
A flat
500?
5%. Yeah, which is amazing in this market. Yeah.
So yeah, I think the Baird team was thrilled, was happy with the outcome, and so we had the pricing a few weeks later, and so I think things turned out to be as good or perhaps even better than what was anticipated. So Jim, would you say anything else about the pricing of the bonds and the impact it has on just the?
No, I mean, it's a tremendous, I mean, it's great. I thought it was gonna be 5.5, to be honest, maybe 5 3/4, given that everybody knew the Fed was gonna raise this week again. And so I was, I was a little wary. It would have worked at 5.5, at 5 1/4, but to get 5 is obviously, a great outcome for us. And had no material pushback at all. I mean, that was one of the easiest investor calls I've ever been on when they were asking their questions, and I thought you did a great job on that.
So I think with that, there's a pre-closing call tomorrow, and then things would close on Monday.
Tomorrow, that's just like a 5-minute bring down. Is that what it is?
I've registered for the call, but beyond that,
Okay. Yeah, I'm guessing it's the bring
I mean,
down.
it's
Okay.
probably, if it's anything like the non-real estate stuff, it's sort of running, whether it's on the call or not, you just want to make sure that everything is ready and signed in an escrow
yeah,
and before Monday morning. So Monday morning, all you have to do is have a quick bring down and just get the closing process rolling. Because if you're chasing signatures on Monday morning, you end up closing too late in the day, and it's just complicated for
Yep.
everyone.
yeah, that seems just right. So those are the next steps in terms of like current kind of topics or status of things. So internally right now, we're based on the closing price, kind of refining our kind of budget and approach to things. And that's gone on over the past week. Jim's been helpful there. Cliff has been helpful. And so there's some of that work that's been happening behind the scenes. Other topics or priorities for us include building out kind of our systems and protocols for reporting, where there's going to be more. And Marianne, you noted that before. And so now it's about getting them up and running. And I'll lean on for some of the guidance there. He's promised us some sort of documentation to help us along. So
Right. I think that's got to be front and center. And I would have brought this up even if you hadn't. But yes, Cliff says he has a sort of turnkey manual or whatever. I think you just need to make sure your protocols are reporting are buttoned up, not just for reporting, but also for sort of internal accountability, right? And just making sure it's going to be a lot more money than you're used to dealing with.
Yep.
And you just need to make sure that, I mean, the system has stuff in place, right? Because I think you can only get money out of the accounts with a proper request and everything. But just need to be able to keep track of like who the authorized persons are and how you maintain that, and how you audit, and keeping all the, I mean, Kristen probably knows this, but there's a lot of rigor that needs to be applied when you're around large pots of money, number one, and when you're around documents about which you need to report publicly. I mean, it's not publicly, but to a number of investors. So we're going to need to step up the degree of like the sophistication of our financial machine, if you will.
Yep. So
Yeah, I think part of every call is going to be going forward. Every board call is going to be a slide showing our covenants and are we meeting them. We've got to, that's got to be top of mind. It's a big number we borrowed.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So I think in addition to that work, there's just the beginning to plan out some of the renovation work, which would be happening as a part of this transaction, which I think would be happening over the next 3 years, or needs to happen within 3 years. And then any sort of fundraising or campaign work that we want to do to cover short-term gaps with regard to just this transaction, as well as over the long term, what might be strategically in the school's benefit. So those are things that have begun to kind of creep in now that this is very real. And so the next steps, just I think a tail off of some of these current priorities. And so there is the refining of our budget, which we'll bring to the AFC in August. There's us kind of obtaining guidance from council around new policies, protocols, systems for reporting, internal accountability measures, et cetera.
It needs to go to AFC. You can bring to DFC if you want, but it has to go to AFC.
Yep. I think there's, as Jim mentioned a moment ago, work with LOSI and solidifying a renovation schedule and then maybe initial steps there. So that would happen with the DFC, and perhaps a conversation in August is where we go. Developing a plan for acknowledging kind of this milestone with stakeholders. We've done a little bit of that easy brainstorming now in terms of what our talking points are, what our story is, and what we want to do with it. And then from there, just the plan around kind of maybe some campaigning or fundraising, which I think could go before the DFC in a next phase in December. So these are some of the immediate term things that will be happening over the coming month and 2 months in taking full advantage of all this. Is there anything missing here that you'd add? Or we've done some amendments to it already. Anything else you'd want to contribute to kind of sharpen some of these next steps?
I think they're the right ones, and I think on all of them, we don't have an infinite amount of time. Right? It's like for the fundraising, it's sort of, we bought it, right? Like you're not gonna launch a big campaign saying we bought our building 3.5 years ago or whatever. So and the procedures, I think you gotta kind of, I mean, you'll have to make changes over time, but you gotta get it almost all right from the get-go, right? So I think don't underestimate like the initial investment that living with all of this is going to take.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
shout if you need more help, because I don't think we know exactly what it's going to entail until we live with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that I agree. I think we're going to do a renovation program, and we're going to explore an expansion program. And my experience raising money for those types of things, you need the architects involved. You need pictures is what you need. You need to show the video. Here's where we are. Here's where we want to go. People love pictures and they write checks to pictures. That's the way it works. So we need to really sit down with the architects and map out. We've got a good list. But we need to show befores and afters and put that all together and figure out who to send that to and raise money around that. That's people react to that. And because we're about to spend a lot of money, redeveloping, renovating, whatever, upgrading facilities. So, and we need more. So I think we need to sit down with them and work that out over the next month or two.
Yeah, and I don't mean to be the compliance Debbie Downer, but I think there's stuff in the documents that says, like, if you fundraise for something, you got to use the fundraise dollars first. And so there's a lot of logistical things to think about.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Not a down at all. Benefits us in the long run. Keep it coming. Cool. All right. So I think strategically, good to have this conversation today and map out some next steps over the coming month. And we will continue to circle back on this. But I think, Monday is a couple of days away. And assuming all goes really smoothly, just thank you, team. This is a big deal for school. So it's been, again, a 4-year effort on top of the school building itself out and continuing to grow. So it's important to kind of celebrate this milestone too. Okay, it's July. We're not going to review. I'm going to hold on this today, the governance dashboard. I think I've done and covered some of the bigger areas of school within current headlines and some of the updates there data wise. So we'll circle back and close out the 22-23 dashboard in August. I'm awaiting a few more data points. So I'm going to use your time when the data is fully in hand. So that'll be next month. And I think with that, we move into committee reports for tonight. Wow, this single deck thing is much easier than toggling back and forth. And we'll start with AFC. We did not have committee meetings this past month. It's July. We didn't do that last year. And so this is more of a FYI of what's been going on the past month and what will be happening over the coming month.
I just had a moment where I was like, oh no, I missed a call.
So Kristen and Chris and I just sort of put this together today. It's just say, hey, what have we been doing? What's been a priority? So just for the full team, things that have been going on. We're reconciling the budget for 22-23 and beginning the audit there. We are revisiting the 2023-24 budget and lease assistance application given the purchase going through. So that's live. We're submitting our 2022 5500 or our 403 B plan documentation that's happening now. And then other things that impact kind of like finance, health of school, monitoring enrollment forecasts, gave you an update a few minutes ago. And then we're also circling back now after kind of interviewing members of leadership teams and administration, the way in which we do our work internally on sort of like managing budget as best as possible, so it's impacting kids as most as possible and doing so in a seamless way. We're revisiting some of our systems there and thinking about the way in which we might streamline that and make it crisper, of course, in alignment with our manuals. So those are things happening from the finance part of our school, and the next steps just tier from that. And so some reconciling budget, some updating, and then continuing to monitor enrollment forecasts. So that's where things are from a financial endeavor standpoint. Are there any questions or considerations worthy of bringing to the full group now?
I think we had some 5500s to catch up on. Are those in process still?
Yes, those are in progress as well. Thanks, Jack.
Okay. Any estimated time? Like, is that a big undertaking or?
No, we seem like we're in good shape. I anticipate we'll have them done, I'd say within the next month, hopefully before the next board meeting even. We were just cleaning up some termination dates with Empower so that we're not a large plan for those years, which we weren't. So we're just avoiding the audit. So just cleaning up the termination dates and getting those submitted through eFast.
Okay, thanks.
On the P&L sort of type stuff for June, there's nothing unexpected, Josh, on the sort of review of the monthly numbers that we would have done in this meeting.
We're reconciling some numbers that I think are worthy of kind of like exploration. I wouldn't say there's anything largely unexpected right now, but there's some work that we want to do to make sure that things are in certain form before bringing things to the full board in August. So I imagine perhaps a mid-month meeting or early month meeting with the AFC as soon as we have things in good form to circle back with.
Yeah.
Okay, so beyond AFC, other committees, DFC, we've talked a lot about their work with the school over this past meeting, and so I'll move on. Nothing more beyond the strategic planning work. With ECPC, nothing to report out this month right now, and we move into SLC. We did not have an SLC call this month, as we did not have a call with any of the committees, but we're going to share out some updates data-wise, specifically high school June regions results for this year. We'll talk about STAR spring results. We'll talk about advanced placement results. That was from a May administration, and then some updates on graduation forecasts. And this includes kids graduating at the end of the summer in August. So I think with that, I'm going to hand the microphone off to Melissa. And
Great.
Here we go.
Thanks, Josh. So we're going to go through a good deal of data now, which is a gift that comes to us each and every late June, early July. So buckle up. I want to headline by saying that we're going to look at some disappointing results today. we're seeing a national drop in exam scores. You have in front of you here a clip from, I believe it's a Times article, that we're seeing lower test scores in all exams everywhere. We're going to see some of that today as well. State results have not been released. So we're looking at our results and we're comparing them to ourselves in the past. But we cannot see to what degree this was a trend in these specific exams across our locality. And we will be looking for that and reporting on that later. Something that was a challenge this year, our attendance rates among students and staff were lower than pre-COVID. We do think that that contributed to some of our results. One thing to keep in mind here is that when we look at Regents results, we're looking at pass rates. Now, all of these exams are given in the context right now of a series of considerations. So while 65 is the cutoff for a pass rate for all Regents courses, students who have a 50 to 64 are able to graduate with that exam number. Many students do know that as well going into these exams, and that will expire this August. So while we generally look at Regents pass rates as somewhat of a proxy for how on track students are for graduation, the numbers you're going to see today aren't going to do that right now. So our June Regents results, we're going to highlight a couple strengths first. I'm going to talk to you about areas of concern, and then we'll dig into the data in specific. We performed similarly to last year in our global history exam, which is a key exam that's we use as an indicator of graduation. Our US history went up 12% from our pre-COVID numbers. So US history has not been administered since before the pandemic, and we went up 12% since that first administration. Though it was a new format for the exam and far more challenging with a great deal more writing. So we were proud of our juniors there. Our two highest performing exams are in classes where students also prepare in that same class for a Regents test. So I'm sorry, for an AP test. So those are US History and Global. Students in many of the classes take two exams. They take their AP followed by their Regents exam. I know we've talked about considering which APs we offer, and it was interesting this year to see this this experience where students who are preparing for APs did better than in some other classes. And then while still low, we did double our Earth Science pass rate since last year. Areas of any questions on those glows? We'll see those numbers in specific in a moment.
Well, so we're talking about 8 or so exams, and we're providing updates. And so you've given 3 exams in which there were strengths, and we'll kind of talk about the others soon, right?
Yes. Areas of concern, overall, our pass rates were far lower than last year. And we underperformed our targets. So we're really stepping back and trying to figure out why. Our largest and most surprising gaps were in Algebra 1, Living Environment, and in ELA. Geometry continues to be a concern. Algebra 1 and ELA had stable teachers and curriculum year over year. So we're exploring why. Living Environment had a more stable environment. Last year, it was taught by a number of teachers in a coverage fashion, and this year we had a consistent teacher. So we were surprised by those results. You never want to be surprised by results. Those are some of the factors there. We did take a bet on an accelerated algebra course with the hope that we would have more students taking advanced mathematics classes by the time that they graduate. That did not seem to pay off. Students did not perform better in that course. So we will not be offering that next year. We also are going to be comparing ELA year over year. However, last year, because of pandemic considerations, only juniors took the test. This year we had some only sophomores took it. This year we had some juniors take it who did not successfully pass. So that did skew the numbers slightly. And in the past and across our high school level content, AP and Regents, we did see that our STEMS courses were more of a concern. Here we have our humanities pass rates. So last year, while we had 69% of students successful on their ELA the first time they took that course, this year, out of all of the students, 43% received a passing grade. A number more will not be impacted for graduation because of the pandemic considerations. And that number would have been higher when we looked just at our sophomore class with a 49% pass rate. Then we have our global and US histories. Global performs similarly to last year and just a bit lower than our pre-pandemic levels. And US history scored a 67%, so outperforming our prior performance. Any questions on ELA so far? Humanities, rather. Okay, let's move on to STEM. We have six courses that we currently offer for Regents in the STEMs classes. Our most important ones are Algebra 1 and Living Environment. We did see some big drops in those year over year, moving from 63% last year to 38% this year in Algebra 1 and Living Environment from 53 to 22%. Questions here? We also have some data on our students with disabilities. Last year, we saw a large drop for students with disabilities in our 10th grade from a 58% pass rate to a 16% pass rate. In ELA, similar drops in global. US history, however, did not have a big drop from our 2019 numbers. Our STEMS courses were similar, with Algebra 1 having only 33% of students compared to last year's 89% of students. Last year's cohort of students with disabilities outperformed their general cohort. So we saw a big difference here this year. And then similarly, Living Environment last year outperformed students who did not have a diagnosed disability compared to this year, where it was quite a bit lower. So we have a lot of planning to do and a lot of action to do. Our goal for August is, with a key focus on ELA, Algebra 1, and Living Environment, move 85% of those students who did not yet score that 50 to an appealable score of at least 50, mitigating any graduation facing harm as they move to the more advanced classes.
The process when you have between 50 and 64, is it automatic, or do you need to submit stuff to get the credit, or how does that work?
It's incredibly simplified. A process like this always exists for some scores in the 60s. And that one requires taking it multiple times, having recommendations, preparing for this 50. All the student has to do and the family has to do is indicate interest. And then we automatically must give them that special appeal, is what it's called here. So it's a guaranteed process unless a family were to say that they did not want that option for their child and they wanted their child to retest. We've never had a family do that.
Okay.
So it's meant to mitigate this. It is anticipated that students are going to struggle a little bit more in this cohort, though that disappears in a month. So students who are receiving lower than forecasted scores on algebra are now going to move into geometry next year. So we're still seeking to get students in the strongest position they can be in.
Okay.
And when we will, because we are taking these exams again in August, we'll have some more data and we'll be able to report on also students who are receiving appeals versus students who are going to need intensified interventions to make sure that they are on track with Regents credits in addition to credit accrual. So there's some things that we're doing in our structures next year to plan for this. For this year's test takers, they're getting high dosage, small group tutoring in their most consequential Regents courses this summer. And then next year they will we have tutoring cycles that we reevaluate with regularity. They will start the year in those tutoring cycles. We're going to implement bi-weekly data cycles in Regents tested classes that I'll be monitoring from my now seat, as well as supporting my principals in monitoring next year, so that we can get more up-to-date information. It's concerning that in some of these courses, our projections, despite giving students mock Regents examinations that were just older Regents, we underpredicted, or we overpredicted rather, students' performance. We are doing some key curriculum work in the most important places, including ELA 10 and 11, living environment, algebra 1, and global history. With global history being something that we're just kind of ameliorating. Algebra 1 is a new exam next year, so we're adapting the same curriculum that the city is using citywide that comes with a lot of resources, and we have a new teacher moving into that course. Another thing that we haven't done so far, because we've always focused on Regents, is certain Regents examinations, such as Algebra 2 and Chemistry, are not always taken as final examinations or the culminating task for a course. They're often prioritized by students who are looking to get an advanced Regents diploma. So we're going to consider the appropriateness of students who have already satisfied their Regents requirements, but might not be eligible for those advanced diplomas in taking those exams next year, when they don't serve the student in any way and are approximate for kids. That might allow within curriculum also just a deeper dive rather than a survey course, which would benefit students after a number of survey courses. That's just, any questions on the current state of Regents or our immediate next steps?
I think one of the big questions we'll have is just, okay, how did our peers do? How did the state do overall? And that'll give us a sense as to whether the results were disappointing across the board, or is there something perhaps unique that we're not nailing or doing that needs to be addressed. And so it'll be really helpful to have those results when we get it.
I think we know what those results are going to look like. I guess my question is, how are we doing versus other charters? I'm thinking about kids transitioning from middle school to high school, and they have options. How are we doing versus that cohort? And I'd love to see that data. But I think, look, everything you read says everything's down across the board, no question about it. So I don't think we're going to be surprised by the state data.
Yeah, I agree with everything Jim said. I think the other question I would have is, can we identify what other schools, hypothetically the schools that do better than we do, can we identify what it is that they do? Can we give, a hard round of thinking to what they do that we might consider doing? And I understand that some things are going to be off the table because that's not who we are. But there's something in here that's not working the way it should work and the way we thought it was going to work. And so I think we need to ask some hard questions in terms of, what is it that we're not doing as well as we should? And I understand we're doing a lot of things well, and that's not criticism. It's just like, how do we make progress from this?
Yeah. I think that idea of bright spotting, finding where this is working, where our where are the schools where students at entry level cohorts aren't performing proficiently, and where are they moving those students really
Right.
quickly? Like one solution we said is when we look at some of our highest performing charter cousins, they enter students at K.
Right.
So we need
Which
to
we
find other
tried
models.
and sort of not an
Right.
option for us right now, but yeah.
Yes. So looking for more specific exemplars within contexts more similar to ours. We started doing some intervisitations last year. I took my principal fellow, who is now one of our APs, over to Coney Island Prep. We actually ended up bringing the college person from Coney Island Prep into our school for next year, and she'll help us with our programming and some other things. Looking for really strong examples and stealing, as well as looking at the paradigm where that's going from a curriculum perspective. So we adapted some of the curriculums that are stronger at others, that other stronger schools are using, and that have tons of training and support. So those are some things that we're already starting to do, but I agree that there's got to be some paradigmatic change that needs to happen for students. And we'll see some other data that just reinforces some trends that we're seeing here.
Mhm. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Mark, to your point, Josh has often brought this up, but in working with a network where there are a series of comparable high schools within the network or middle schools, that's often their approach is like, all right, if we've got these 5 middle schools all within our network, which ones are doing really well, which ones are not, and what's the difference? And then identifying that and then spreading the good stuff to the other schools practice wise. And so we don't have that luxury as a mom and pop, but we can still borrow from our network, neighbors and friends. And so I'm excited to do that. And I think, again, assuming Juliana joins our board in August, we'll have an additional resource there to provide that kind of insight.
Yes.
One thing too, Jake and I met at his office to sign the bond documents, and we were talking. They were, he's on the board of another school now, and they were thinking expansion and all this sort of stuff. And they decided not to do that. Instead, they decided that they would do a program where they would push out all of their playbook essentially to everybody for free. And so they haven't quite done it yet, but I think he might be a good resource. Let's see what they're doing. Let's take a look and see what we can grab out of that. There's going to be good stuff because their numbers are clearly not what I just saw. So I think there are opportunities to look at what others are doing and grab, and you guys are far closer to this than I am, but and grab the best practices and try to implement some of those. So
Yeah,
I'll reach out to Jake. I don't know where they are on that. This was, I guess, when did we sign, Josh? 2 weeks ago, a week ago, whatever. He was in his office talking about it, but they're trying to push out instead of expanding. They're just going to make everything, all their curriculum available to people.
Yes, I think we will see when we get to our AP results that some of our strongest results come from folks who are using curriculum that they brought from other networks who've made things open access. So I think that would be great, especially I think Jake's network has more middle school stuff that would give the foundation, provided that we are feeding into our high school. Those would anything is supportive. We're making some big changes, but we need to move fast here.
Yeah. Okay.
That is just 1/4 of the information we have for you this evening. So we'll move on. The next, we're going to look at STAR assessment. So a reminder of kind of the function of our STAR assessments as Regents results are exit examinations for a course and the coursework. Our STAR assessments are something we choose to do so we can see how students are doing with their skills in reading and numeracy as compared to their cohort, their nationwide cohort. So we're looking to see, this really tells us growth for kids, because once you pass that algebra exam, you don't take algebra again. This allows us to see kids across years of time. Our average participation was 86 to 93% for all exam administrations. So the reliability of the data is pretty strong. There's a couple areas that I wish more students participated, but we're able to see that here. Our areas of concern are, we want to see a student growth percentile goal of 60. We want to see that kids are growing more than kids in other places, so that we know that we are moving them as swiftly as we need to be. Their entry performance is their entry performance, but if we're moving them across time, then we know we're doing the good work. Our relative growth was greater for fall to winter window versus the fall to spring window. That's hard to say exactly why. It could be that we focus a little bit more on exam prep, so that kids are very much in that zone at that point of the year. It could be more behavioral. It's hard to know. Those are all guesses, but the first part of the year, kids are growing faster than the second part of the year. And at the high school level, in a couple grade levels, we wish we saw higher participation. We have lower participation in a couple subjects and grade levels. That's because STAR was happening in the same week and same times as an early readings exam this year, and we think that impacted it, as well as with some tech challenges. So what you're seeing here is the completion. So across grade levels, between 56% in that low outlier and 100% of students completed STAR in spring 2023 for 84%. So across the school, we're able to say reliably that we think that this is how students are growing. And this is the reading percentile ranking. So when we say reading percentile, because you're going to hear percentile twice, we're talking about how did students perform compared to all of their peers, their same age. And so what we're seeing here are percentiles that are, they did improve as the year went on. However, they are still generally below the 30th percentile, with the exception of our 7th grade readers ended above the 30th percentile for at the end of the year. We can also see that our entry cohorts of 6th grade and 9th grade, we see students performing well below their peers. 6th grade is starting out in about the 23rd percentile there, and our 9th graders read below the 10th percentile compared to their peers. So sometimes when we're seeing these results, we are also, this predicts that students might struggle with grade level reading as compared to, say, our 11th grade. Math, similarly, our 12th grade here struggled to complete. I think that 12th graders are hard to come by at the end of the year, but between around 79% of students completed this assessment for year-over-year comparisons. And our math percentile rating is similar, though we're seeing some grade levels reach that 30th percentile, with our 11th grade ending the year closer to the 40th percentile. This is a really interesting slide for me, because when we look at things like our advanced, our math performance on content level exams, and our STEMS performance in AP exams, we don't tend to see students outperforming in things that rely on numeracy. So we do know that once you get to a high school level or a college level in STEMs, it is a really, you are using both your literacy and numeracy skills, but this is less aligned to some of the things we see. I think it's just the jump in rigor. So, okay. The next thing we're going to look at is student growth percentiles. And this one is not looking at absolutely how do you compare to your peers. It's looking at how do you compare growing, your growth to your peers. So this looks at students nationwide. It's on a 1 to 99 scale. Lower numbers are less growth, higher numbers are higher relative growth, which is why we'd like an overall goal of 60%. While we know that, so we know that that is students trending towards proficiency there. Questions before? There's so much, so I'm talking so much. Our goal is 60 with ELA reading here, it's not ELA, it's reading. We had one grade meet this goal, that's 7th grade. We've seen some strength from that grade level generally, and they breached that 60th percentile. All other grades were under the 50th percentile, with some of the grades getting a little bit closer. And then the next is math. No grade met the growth of 60, but 6, 8, 9, and 11 had student growth percentiles under above 50. So questions on STAR generally?
Does STAR come with any tools to, draw conclusions from all of this? Because it's presumably, I mean, if it has a huge data set to compare to, is there anything that comes with that?
It doesn't necessarily say what in our instruction is preventing kids from this, from gaining. What it does do is highlight the exact skills that students might need support with.
Okay.
So that is something that we use in our intervention groups in order to identify where we might need to work with kids. It also does some predictions about how students will perform by the end of the year.
Okay, but so basically on like this chart has 1 or 2 above 50, but people above 50 mean below 50 means compared to the entire data set, a STAR, we're below the median, right? Is that the right way to look at this?
Yes,
Good.
below 50 means that you're growing less than 50%.
Then more than half, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
For students that began at the same level as of the fall. So it's meant to norm
It's
at
measuring growth, right? So yeah, it's that your delta of growth is less than, more than half of the kids taking the test have grown more than your kids.
And so for us, thinking about both this metric as well as other metrics that were assessed on at the state level, trending toward proficiency in our mind means obtaining growth values in STAR of above the 50th percentile or 60th percentile. And so we're showing that here. It should also be indicated in having kids go from 6th to 7th to 8th grade at different proficiency levels on the state exam, where you're increasing consistently the number of students in a grade that are proficient at their grade level. And so that's what we'd like to see and what we're aiming for.
Yes. And then if we, it's helpful to look at these measures together. So if we went back to slide 67, we'd see that of our 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, our 7th graders are growing less relative to their peers, but they're a higher percentile than our 6th or 8th grade. So if we were proficient in reading and math scores across the board, we might not attend to the growth rating as much because our students who are underperforming us would ideally be growing faster. Unfortunately, we need to really accelerate that growth given that we are at the bottom ends of the percentile ranking. So, but like some of the lower performing grades here are performing at an absolute better level, better than some of their peers.
Right. So the sort of incremental growth probably is a little harder to accomplish as you're higher on the performance scale, but it also doesn't matter as much. Right?
Yeah. But we're not high enough on the performance scale where we don't want 60% for all of our kids yet. But that is some things to note here. Is when we look at that. So that 6th grade math growth percentile, which is our closest to 60, is important because they had a lot of room to grow there. Similar to our 9th grade. Great.
So we've talked about Regents, we've talked about STAR. We're going to move up and talk about advanced placement results from May.
Great. Josh, did we punted unliterably?
Yes, we did. Yeah,
Great,
we'll come
okay.
back. to those school
Yeah.
results.
There's another set of reading results that like make this it just gets under the hood a little bit more. But this is a lot anyway. So we're gonna look at
Before you go to the APs, do you ever worry, I think we've hit on this in the SLC a little bit, but do you ever worry about over testing kids with all these different, and if at some point it's more data than is helpful?
Yes, I think like I do worry about that. It's a lot. It gets to be a lot with regents and AP exams both being at the end of the year for high school, for example. STAR assessments are really efficient. They're done in about 25 minutes and can be done in class. So while it's a little exhausting at the end of the year, and sometimes I think perfection as far as completion, for example, with our 11th grade who had a regents that week is challenging, I think it's still really important. So this measure is efficient, but it's a lot of information. It's a lot on kids. So I think if I could do something different, it might be regents differently, but that's one we might get there, just with the like timing and amount of time it takes to actually like sit down and test kids. So it's a lot.
Melissa, if you had sort of unlimited resources, right? It's in a perfect universe, what does your gut tell you on what would make the most difference here? Or do you not have enough data to tell yet?
If I had unlimited resources, I think incredibly individualized tutoring attention for students, especially at our entry level grades, 6th, 9th grade, a tutor for every child who's performing under, who has skills, who has the knowledge to tutor them just on the skills. Because we're a secondary school. We're 2 secondary schools. So there is an assumption within our standards that students have skills that something like STAR tells us they don't have. Regents are an incredibly lagging indicator, which is while like regents are not my choice, APs are a choice, but it's a choice we could never not offer and offer a competitive high school experience. STAR is my choice. And I choose that because I need this information about student skills. So I would get an incredible amount of year-round tutoring support for students beyond what teachers are doing. That's one thing.
Okay. I mean, so let's think about whether there are ways to fundraise for that, right? Because
or I mean, have you guys taken a sharp pencil to the administrative layer of the school and thought about shifting resources toward the one-on-one at the 6th grade, which is, we found out that's critical, the reading.
Yeah, because it's exponential from there, right? So
yeah, exactly. I mean, where are we spending the money? Are we spending it the right way? If that's the answer, and I agree with it, should we be moving resources to that?
I think
we're not asking you to answer that this very minute, but I think it's a good thing.
Yeah. No, I'm just throwing it out there. It's a thought exercise. You always got to look. Anybody with an organization deals with limited resources. How do you allocate them? And I completely agree, Melissa, with your assessment that would be a huge. If we could do it, if we had the resources to do it, that would be fantastic. So, can we create those resources? Are we misallocating somewhere?
And there's the reality of finding experts. The expertise, even at the classroom level, some of our administrative overhead goes to the fact that we need to deeply train and coach teachers. So we wouldn't want to lose out on that element, because that's another thing I would do, is thinking about how we research that. So
no need to dig in right now, but just, that's how I would dig into something like this, is just think about it. Got a couple weeks. And
so if anybody finds dozens of secondary reading coaches for students, like tutors, let me know.
But you know
We'll do
what?
something.
If we don't find a dozen, but we find three, then let's start with
Right.
three, right? I mean, it's sort of,
Yeah.
at some point, we need to dig at it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. And
Is there anything
then
we could do at the at the pre-6? So someone gets admitted of 5th grade. Is there something we could do during the summer? So I'm just looking at my daughter just got admitted. This is, come on, this is kindergartens, but the school sent her a book. It's 100 pages homework for the summer, and it's math and it's reading and it's this and it's that, to prep them for what they're going to see in kindergarten. Is there something similar to that we could be doing to introduce to these kids before they start that this is the way it goes down once you're in Unity, and even some basic stuff, like get them prepped for it, that might give a little bit of a head start into that 6th grade level?
yeah, I think it's something worth exploring, or something like a pre-high school or pre-college, even if we started before the traditional year with some of the data about how
Right.
students are doing. We are already in our programming before we found out, I'm looking at back at slide 35, that our 9th grade is reading below the 10th percentile compared to their peers. So in crafting some of that programming for students,
Could
I
you,
think it's
yeah,
helpful.
could you make even like optional summer programming available for incoming 6th graders if they, right? I mean, if you open camp, could they have, some of the existing kids are doing summer instead of doing it at the end of the year? Can you offer it for 2 weeks in August before the school starts, or I don't know.
Yeah. And I think that's another way of thinking about where can these resources come from. We're running large summer programs that are necessary at the high school for credit accrual, at the middle school for both skills and enrichment. But at our middle school have been really helped, I think, by some of the grants we've gotten. So thinking through some of those things as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Including how do we get supports for students baked into our school day. We have added mandatory tutoring time to the afternoons at the school, but thinking about other structures as well. APs.
Let's do it.
All right. So AP results, some strengths. We had an uptick in enrollment this year. Another strength to pull out is our AP literature course. It was one of our stronger courses, that should say last year. Last year, it was one of our highest performing courses, and it grew this year as well. And then we saw 9% growth in environmental science over last year. This is notable as well because it was our course with the highest enrollment, and actually has a high number of students with disabilities who took the class. We actually made one of the classes an ICT co-taught class. So I'm wondering to the degree to which that was supportive. We haven't pulled out the SWD data in the same way yet. Areas of concern, the following courses had 10% of students score 3 or above, fewer than 10%, biology, calculus, computer science, environmental science, AP Lang, world history, US history, and US Gov. Most disappointing so far, 64% of exams had students scoring a 1 as compared to 55% last year. And this was especially true in our STEMS courses and in Lang. And our seniors struggled more in classes prior. There's a favorite data point that I have for students called the equity and access score, and our seniors underperformed any cohort before them. We've seen a lot of struggles with our senior class this year. I didn't read that below above though. With that spot that was really challenging, like looking into the future, our juniors currently in their junior year have outperformed those seniors, and they have the highest percentage class yet of any student with AP credit. And all of the prior classes had a truncated version for pandemic purposes. That was an option to them. So our senior class is actually poised to do just far better than this class we saw. And then something I'm like chewing on, a number of we would do AP walkthroughs, and a number of our AP classes were scheduled for first period. And I'm wondering the impact of attendance and on-time attendance on that score as well. Here are AP scores. Light blue is in 2019, dark blue 2022, and 2023 this year. One of those first period classes, for example, was 2D art, 3D art and design, 2D art and design. I'm reading a very small screen, but I know it's 2D. So we saw a decrease year over year, and I'm wondering the degree to which attendance was there. However, lit and comp went up a little bit this year, so we're excited about that.
You were also talking about smaller numbers in some of these courses with art and design. I think there were 8 students, and 2 of them received or earned a passing score and are walking away with college credit. The other 6 did not.
Yeah, and I think like would have been capable had they been around a little bit more. Interesting to me is we did see some dips in some of our U.S. history courses, or our history courses this year, even though we saw strength in those Regents results. So these same kids took both exams. So I think that preparing for this rigorous test still served kids, but they weren't able to breach that jump into college credit. Though if we go to the next one, this breaks down into receiving a 3, receiving a 2, or receiving a 1, a 3 or higher. A 2 is likely prepared for college level work. So that's basically like you're ready for this class in college. You're not ready to skip it. You should take it in college. And a 1 is we're not sure. Like it's not indicative. It's not ready for college level work. But 2s are still considered a strong indicator of college success. So we had slightly more of those, and in our STEMS classes, as we mentioned before, but our students in our art class, our students in seminar, many of them received 2s.
Is it the same kids who have the 3s in all the various topics generally, or is it, I mean, do you have a small cohort of high performing students that perform across the board, or is that more complicated of a picture than that?
It's actually more complicated of a picture. So when I ran what they call the AP Scholar Report, you're an AP Scholar if you get 3 AP scores of 3 or above across your career. There was 1 senior and 1 junior who received that. So that means all the other passes are spread across kids.
Okay.
But Roland Rousseau next year, he's ready to skip to sophomore year of college. So that's, and he hasn't had, our juniors have not had as many opportunities as our seniors have. But I think close to 19% of them already have college credit, and then we'll have double the opportunities next year.
Well, this is just one additional point beyond what you said. I think so. I think for us, last year we took pride in the area in blue being lower than the year before. So we had fewer students scoring a 1. And so a 1 is not what we're happy with. We want our kids experiencing a course, getting something out of it. And typically a 2 or greater reflects that. And so for this year, we had 64% of our exams as a 1 versus 55% the year before. So a slight an uptick. At the same time, we did have more students taking AP courses this year than last year. And so it's sort of hard to fully make sense of all that. But our goal is to minimize 1s, which then for us represent kids having meaningful experiences and taking something away from that course, which sets them up to be confident and ready for a college level course.
True. And I think that we did have a differently performing senior class this year. So That is still our goal, but it is something that makes it different year over year because AP courses are so weighted towards the seniors. So here's some stuff we're doing to improve, to move back to the trajectory we were on that we were proud of. We are removing one course for this year. It's a course we definitely want to have at our high school because it is college writing focused and research focused, but we're going to shore up our staffing before we invest in that. We did add one lower level math. The only math we offer is AP Calc. Students have not been successful in that class, and they are chosen to take that class in middle school. So we're going to offer a new class, AP Pre-Calc, and we'll see if that supports in students being more ready for upper level math by raising the rigor in that course. Our strongest teacher, who teaches that AP Lit class you saw that grew, was the one class that grew this year. He will move into teaching Lit in 11th grade and Lang in 12th grade, and other teachers will split 11, 12 in the non-AP sections. So we talked about using bright spots, what's working. We're going to have somebody who has more success with what's been working, invest in those two AP classes. Our AP Bio and AP Gov classes will be taught by department chairs. One of our department chairs is a returning teacher, now returning as a department chair, and she taught AP Gov, which had a more successful first year. And then this year for AP Computer Science, which had a very low year, we had folks teaching that as sort of a side role, a sixth class, or our principals and chairs of departments were teaching that as an extra course. We will have one person investing in training in that this year.
And
we
do
will.
you think, sorry, do you think, didn't mean to cut you off. When you
No
have
worries.
somebody who's strong and whose cohorts are performing well, do you think any of that is transferable to other teachers? Or do you think that person is sort of intrinsically wired to be an amazing teacher and it's sort of not exactly transposable? Or how do you think about, what can we learn from each other?
Yep. In specific, the teacher I'm thinking about, we've worked together for, this will be our 12th year. I can say this person has grown across time, and I think all of our teachers can if they're really sticking with it. In specific, in rearranging, he's been coaching a teacher who's worked in the 9th grade who will move into the 11th grade class. So he's supported her in her curriculum and development. He's also leaving her some of her the resources from his other class. So we're starting to see that transfer there. We have teachers observing each other with frequency. We have shared spaces. And then we've also had Jacob doing some of our PD. So I think leaning into that a little bit more in these bright spot classes and thinking about how we illustrate these strengths. The other things we're going to do, these results came during teachers' breaks, so we will be sharing these with leaders and teachers. I will be the same presentation. Our site level leaders will see next week with probably even a little bit more. So we'll make sure they're hydrated. And then we're establishing targets and key actions for 2022, that should say 23, 24 at the student grades and high school levels. So that we can make sure we have realistic targets that are also ambitious. Any other AP questions? I'm excited to redo this next year because I know that our senior class is on track for a strong year. I know that these will go up.
Mm-hmm.
And then our graduation forecast. This looks familiar. You've seen most of this structure recently. So on track, and students who have graduated we're now at 45. So this is up from the last time we spoke, with 85% of students currently marked as graduating. We have one student still in that off track bucket. That means that student is engaged in summer school. She should be completing her final course next week. She's getting a lot of love and attention from our summer school team, and she just has that one math class to complete by August. So we foresee her meeting this goal. And so we will meet our August projection of 87%, which will fall short of our goal of 93% this year. There are still 7 students who cannot graduate in 4 years. They each have very individual stories. One student is going to an identified transfer school. We knew about this in the second semester of her senior year, and identified a school that's consistent with her goals. We're just waiting for them to have that availability. One student had been in home instruction, tried to transfer back, is unable to leave her home at all, and is intending to transfer back to home instruction. We have one student who's living outside her home. We are working with her youth empowerment coach and a team that works with her to find her a new setting. That makes sense. And then we have one student who is 3 credits shy of graduation, who's said he'd prefer to go to a school that can help him expedite that outside of Unity. So we are working with these families and students to put them in settings that are appropriate to their individual needs, whether that's a location such as home or the Bronx, or a school that matches their intended program. We have 2 students that have been truant for 1 to 2 years. We have not seen them, and we will need to discharge them. And then we have one student who was truant this year, but has expressed a desire to come back and finish with Unity by completing a 5th year. We had one student do that this year and was successful by the end of the year. So we're hopeful that we can see him through to graduation. That's the story of our 7 students.
How are people
Questions?
truant for 1 to 2 years and still a part of Unity? What does truant mean, and how are they still even a part of Unity?
So
not being
truant means that they have not attended, or they have not attended. I think Chris can maybe correct me with the exact number. I think it's 20 days at least in a row, with no accommodations made. So Unity has worked with these families or seeking the student. One of them was outside of the city. However, we can't discharge the student until they've been reached a certain age and they've been truant for a certain amount of time. We will be able to discharge them, but I believe we have to wait to the beginning of the school year for that to be official.
Thanks, Melissa. Yeah, they have to complete the school year in which they turn 17 and be absent for 20 consecutive days during that school year, particularly. And then they have to have a planning interview, an additional outreach showing the school has made good faith effort, extensive good faith effort to try to get the student to return to school. It's a pretty detailed process.
Okay, thanks.
And it's a system we have not had to rely on. We've largely been very close with our families and students, and been able to find some sort of pathway for them, even if they say, I like one of the students above, I just can't do this in this setting. I need to do this from home. We work with them, but these students have been impossible to get for their families sometimes too. So we will go through the expected channels, but this was a new challenge for us this year.
I think to Jim's point, I think in looking at the class of 2024 and in experiencing this class, I think there's some things we're doing sooner to position ourselves and families and students to do what's best educationally for them. And so that communication happening sooner, us having better information at hand sooner, all bodes well. So those are some things we're doing internally to make sure that we're best positioned to support kids across the board, particularly kids who are in really unique and challenging circumstances, such as some of the students who we've described here.
Yeah, I mean, if you have kids who are not showing up, they're taking a seat for somebody else who would show up and we could help, so can we get in front of that and say, okay, you've decided to go in a different direction. we theoretically have a wait list, let's fill that seat with somebody who actually wants to be a part of this.
Yeah.
I understand, Chris, what you're saying. There's a process, so it's not that easy, but I get it.
Melissa, thank you for that deep dive, 4 times over. We're gonna move into some, not maybe not lighter business, but we've got a couple of approvals, one around minutes and then one around a slightly amended calendar, which I'll go into detail about. So I guess, Jim, back to you.
Okay, yeah. So first item up for vote, minutes from the prior meeting. Presumably everybody's had a chance to review them. Any questions? No? Okay, all in favor of approving? My hands, thank you. Okay, Josh, you want to talk about the calendar?
Yeah, so we this was approved last month, and I talked about the in and outs of the calendar, which are just listed on this slide here. Following our board meeting, the DOE, and you may have seen this in the news, came back out and made some changes to their calendar for the year after perhaps there being some grumblings among administration, staff, teachers, etc. They had added a couple of days to their school year in what they had a month and a half ago versus what they've had in prior years. And so they came back out and in mid-June, essentially took 4 days off the calendar of school. And that's the final calendar for the year. They also, which is good, put forward their calendar for the next calendar year and the year after that, which they've never done. So we have plenty of advance notice about what they're doing in 2 years from now and 1 year from now.
Unless they change it in mid-June to add more holidays.
This is true. This is true. So I think they were at 185 days. They brought back these days and they chose 4 days that they would switch back to vacation days. One of those is a Monday after Easter. 2 of those days are the tail end of the spring break. So they're adding 2 days of the spring break. And then there's a holiday, an Islamic holiday in June, Eid, that they're also now honoring. So in looking at those changes and thinking about school and thinking about where we've maneuvered best for each of those days, what we'd like to do is honor 3 of those days and those changes, and then not honor one of those other days. And so essentially the Monday after Easter, we'd like to have school. There's no reason not to, it's fine. And so we like to keep that going. And looking at the other 2 days, the 2 days after the spring break, there have been some hardship in bringing people back, kids back, if their siblings are on break, others are on break, etc. We want to get off to a strong start coming off a break. We don't want to be managing, officiating lower attendance, having lesson plans be taught to half kids and then kids coming back. It can be a hardship, and it just isn't worth it sometimes. In terms of like the added time versus the payoff in terms of learning. And then the holiday in June is one in which we're administering Regents exams at the high school, so we couldn't really have session anyway, and we're typically doing roundtables at the end of the year in June during the time at the middle school, so there isn't a big consequence of just honoring that Islamic holiday. Our population of Islamic students has grown over time, so I feel like it's okay if we honored that day and it wouldn't influence or impact student learning in a way that we felt was detrimental. So I think with that, we come back today and say, hey, look, we'd like to move with the DOE, but not completely in sync after analyzing each of those days in which they made some changes. And that's the rationale. Never perfect, but we feel as if it's
yeah, I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. You look at the numbers we just looked at, and the DOE is looking at the same numbers, and you're cutting back the number of instruction days. It's like, come on, we got a problem here. We need more. I get it. I mean,
I think, so within our charter and thinking about just sort of what's allowed, we're still well within the number of days we need, and we still have more days in the DOE, but we also have a longer day. So our charter states have more
Yeah,
minutes.
I think that's all fine. I think if you know that if you're not aligned, you're gonna have days with bad attendance. I don't think it helps anyone, right? So,
Yeah.
but yes, I think there's a bigger problem there, which is, you barely get kids in school for half the calendar year effectively.
Yeah, and negotiating these calendars is apparently really tricky. I'll say that. So that's the second approval item. That's what's up for approval.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions, comments? Okay, all in favor? Okay, thank you. Okay. Josh, I have a comment. Seeing no public people here.
And preview of next meeting. It's the August meeting. So we went heavy on data today because we wanted to get it out to you. We'll circle back to some of these items as we marinate on them more and look at them more deeply. And then there'll be a series of items in August pertaining to the start of the school year. And so I imagine we'll have some thoughts on handbooks. We didn't get to where I wanted to get to bring that to the board tonight, so we'll hold off on that until August. And then there'll be some goal-oriented business that I bring to this team in August too. And then some of the conversations we had around the building purchase, those will come back around, and we'll make some advances there based on the next steps I proposed this evening and our discussion this evening. So that's the preview as I see it now.
All right, thank you. All right, should we move to executive session?